Ohana Book 2 Birds of a Feather Chapter 4. It was never a good thing when Commander Tower showed up on their doorstep. Tom took one look at the black van with tinted windows outside and nondescript signage and texted Wade to cover for him for a while. He received a thumbs up in return and pocketed his cell phone after turning it on silent. If the military was here, there was every chance that they had already hacked his phone and knew that, but he set his coffee mug down as Sonic came over and leaned against the kitchen counter to look outside before Tom placed a hand on his head.
"Keep your head down, buddy,"
he told his son, ruffling his wool and receiving a swat in return.
"What's going on?"
Tails asked over his breakfast waffles, ears perked back and namesake swaying curiously behind him. Next to him, Knuckles paused in his fruit salad, frowning deeply, and Ozu let out a low growl at his feet.
"Nothing to worry about."
Tom reassured them, waving a hand as Sonic sipped lightly back over to his brothers, seated on Tails' other side.
"Just someone that wants to see me outside. I'll be right back."
Are we going to the baseball field still?
Sonic asked, raising his hands into a batter position.
I need to beat Knuckles from last match.
As if you could beat me in baseball. My swing is superior to yours in every way.
Good, Sonic could distract them while he dealt with this. They didn't need this. Tom left his boys arguing and picked his gun holster up off the coffee table, attaching it to his belt just in case. Maddie was at work, and he'd had just enough time to make the boys their breakfasts before the van showed up. Commander Tower exited the vehicle, flanked by a woman he'd never seen before, and Tom stepped outside, closing the door behind him with a click and making his way over, pointedly placing a hand on his hip near his pistol.
"I thought I said you didn't need to serve ass, Commander."
A fine hello to you too, Mr. Wachowski.
Tower was cordial as always, hands clasped behind his back and at attention even in front of a civilian like Tom Wachowski. He eyed the pistol and then raised a hand.
There's no need for violence. We come as friends.
Funny because I remember my sister-in-law's thinking a little differently than you.
But Agent Hannell did marry her at the end.
Tower tutted, clicking his tongue against the roof of his mouth, and Tom got the feeling that he disliked the fact that he had lost control over one of his agents.
All in a day of ensuring national security.
Tom hated these military jerks. He rolled his eyes.
"What do you want to work in half an hour, and if I recall, I'm still cleaning up after them as your men then left around Green Hills."
Robotnik was no longer under a payroll when that happened. We discussed that.
Tower waved the hand that he had raised and then gestured to the woman next to him.
Entop has intercepted a call to the Phi about your bows. I thought you might like to know.
Tom felt his blood run cold.
"What?"
Someone in Green Hills called the FBI hotline about terrorist activity several times in the last month.
Topaz said, stepping forward and handing him a file. It felt heavy as Tom looked down at it and opened it.
Since the battle with Robotnik's Mecha, there have been reports that some people feel that the military should step in to handle your children, Mr. Wachowski.
She chose her words carefully, lifting a hand to tuck a stray strand of hair that had fallen out of the tight bun behind her ear. He looked in disbelief at some of the transcripts, feeling ghost pimples raise the hair on his arms. He knew some of these people, had known them since he was a child himself. How could they? They were good people,
"They're just kids."
he whispered, sealing himself from the tremors that wanted to happen.
They helped clean up even though I told them they didn't need to. Knuckles nearly sprained a muscle carrying so many heavy things in one day all at once.
But there are still aliens, Mr. Wachowski.
Tower said, eyeing him disapprovingly.
And as sad as I'm to say, there will still be people who look at them and feel fear. America is xenophobic at its worst. You have seen that across the country with the president and the people who believe his words if word of them got out of Green Hills then.
I said I knew how to handle them, and I do.
he snapped, closing the file and shoving it back at Agent Topaz, who blinked at him and then turned her attention to her commander for orders. Tower didn't react, instead cleared his throat and straightened his shoulders.
I'm merely suggesting that we study them to know how to inhibit their abilities. The blue and red ones are my main concern, but your yellow child knows.
Tails that.
Tom's temper was beginning to rise more and more, his hands clenched at his side.
He's only it and has an intelligence level of 300, yet untested. He can build a technical Lego in seconds without instructions. These kids have never had one before, Tower. And you take that away from them, there's no telling what they'll do.
Silence dropped between the three of them, and the older man sighed and tilted his cap as he closed his eyes.
I understand your concern, though, Maz, believe me, I do. Things have been going on for longer than you realize. The least I can do is help you, for their sake, of course.
He gestured to Topaz and she turned to open the van door, reaching inside for something and closing it again before returning her attention to Tom, handing him what she had gathered. He looked down to find a cell phone in his hands, much more state-of-the-art than anything Apple had released in recent years.
A direct line to my private number and office in here.
Topaz handed him a couple of vouchers.
For the zoo in the next county, take your family for a day out.
Tom felt like tearing the tickets up, but he knew the cost of getting the boys and Maddie into somewhere like that for a day. Instead, he huffed and stuffed them into his wallet, leering at both of the agents.
I will not be calling you anytime soon.
He growled, shooing them off as he turned to go back into the house.
But if I find out anything to my boys, prepare to pay, Commander. Believe me, nothing will stop my hands from finding Eric.
I believe you, Thomas Wachowski.
Tom watched them drive off inside, collecting himself before he went back into the house. He kicked at a rock in their driveway, letting out a loud
Darn it.
in turn at both the pain it caused him and at what had happened. People he'd known his whole life were turning on him and his family, and there was likely nothing he could do about it beyond talking to them. He guessed there were some things the military was good for, even if most of them were complete and utter jerks, and he headed back inside, wondering what he was going to say to the kids. He came into Sonic and Knuckles' row housing in the lounge room, the furniture pushed out of the way and Tails standing on the couch providing commentary and being referee. Knuckles currently had Sonic in a headlock, but both of them stopped and looked at him when he came in, Sonic's brow and ears twitching underneath the red furred arm wrap around him. Tom inclined his head slightly in a way they only understood and clapped his hands together, rubbing them as the tickets and phone burned a hole in his pockets.
Ulrich wanted me to drive you guys to the baseball field before I head off to work.
Nothing to worry about.